Hi, my name is Alex. I'm 20 years old. I'm a student here at UNLV, and I identify as gender fluid or gender nonconforming. So a little bit about my identity as a trans person. For me, I don't really think of gender on a day-to-day basis. I'd actually, identify myself as more without having a gender, a gender as some people would put it. But I actually started off with labeling myself, and I had a lot of trouble, and a lot of confusion about who I was. So I was like, I have to fit a particular label. I have to be like this or that or that. And I was constantly moving between different labels, not feeling comfortable with either label that I identified myself with. So I came to a point where I decided I'm just gonna be myself. I'm gonna identify as trans, non-binary, just leave it as that, because for me labels don't really matter that much. But one thing that I've noticed being a trans individual and just interacting with society, even being a student here, I've noticed that it's really hard, especially if you don't conform to one or the other gender, male or female, the male or female genders, the binary genders as we call them. That it's really hard because our society is so used to calling people by he, she. They're used to seeing things in either or, and that's not just gender, it's also sexuality, it's also other topics of conversation as well. So I think for me it's in terms of the biggest struggle that I have is navigating through that with my own self and my own identity, and making sure that I feel validated on a day-to-day basis in a society that doesn't really see me as a validated person. So I guess my best advice to non-binary people like me is to honestly just wake up in the morning and tell yourself every day in the mirror that you're a valid human being, that your identity is respected, and that even if people around you don't see you for who you are, that you yourself know exactly who you are, and that's the only thing that matters. And honestly, if people aren't accepting you and they're not seeing you for who you are, then obviously that tells you that they're not your friends, and you should probably find better friends. But I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have. Also, I think one of the other issues, especially for me, because I tend to be very feminine presenting, is that I receive harassment and discrimination on a day-to-day basis. A lot of men in particular, they'll see me walking down the street and they'll think that I'm a cisgender woman, which is the opposite of transgender woman, which is someone who's assigned female at birth. And they assume that I'm a cisgender woman, so they call me, they catcall me, and they basically, just catcall me, and then they find out that I'm not a cisgender woman, and then they freak out. And that's just something that I've always been freaked out with, and I've always been scared about, especially when I'm walking alone at night, because that is often the root cause of gender nonconforming people and trans women's deaths, is through people misinterpreting them to be something that they're not, and then getting freaked out by it and murdering them or brutally inflicting violence upon them. So that's something that, as a trans person, it's really hard to come to terms with, because you want to go out and represent who you want to be. So if I want to wear a dress, I don't want to feel like I have to conform to society by not wearing a dress. But then at the same time, I have to really understand that there's a safety component of being trans. It's how can I, safety obviously is the most important thing for me. So how can I navigate my transness around safety so that, I can compromise my I don't want to say compromise, but physically and how I look and how I present myself, compromise that part of myself in places that aren't very trans friendly, so that I can, I have a sense of safety, and that I'm gonna be okay walking by myself in the middle of the night. So there's that whole component, and I think that another piece of advice I like to give to trans people is to understand that a lot of us live in this bubble where we're so used to just being able to freely express who we are, but the case is that outside of that bubble, people aren't that way. And so you really have to understand that safety matters first. If you know you're going to be walking, or if you know you're going to be in an area where people don't, accept trans people, you really just have to make a point to prioritize your safety. So, and I also think that's just important in general to understand that, because I think a lot of trans people feel like everyone accepts them, or in that if they don't, that they should feel bad about it. And the reality is that that's not the case. Like, we get murdered on a day-to-day basis from people who don't understand and don't intend to understand who we are. So, yeah, I guess that's my piece of advice. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about anything else.
Other than that, state your name and then...
Oh, yes. And so my name is Alex. I use they, them pronouns, and I identify myself as being without a gender.
All right. Thank you.